we gave them a survey about their beliefs during pregnancy, what they perceived themselves to be susceptible to health-wise, and whether their provider, whether it was a midwife or obstetrician, provided counseling on physical activity during pregnancy. And we found that most people understood that there was kind of a general benefit to physical activity during pregnancy. But the benefits were kind of all over the place. There wasn't like one benefit that really stood out. What there was the most agreement on is women, even though they knew it was overall beneficial, they didn't do it. They didn't exercise because they were tired and unmotivated. Those were the two main, and that is consistent across the research. I mean, women, we're tired.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
working, we're raising
Yeah.
kids. It's like exercise is low on the list,
Sure.
especially when it's kind of just, yeah, there's a general benefit. I don't really know how it applies to me.
Yeah. Christiana, I noticed that you're bouncing around in front of the camera here. What's going on over there on your side? Are you okay? Do you need a bathroom break or
No, I got a little Jack here. I don't know if you can see him.
Jack?
Oh, good
I can
morning.
see
I could
him.
just
Hi,
woke him
sweet
up.
boy.
Yeah, he just had his 2-month checkup yesterday.
Two months old. Is
Yeah,
everything in good, clean bill of health?
yeah, he's perfect. I'm
Right
very
on.
lucky.
Right on.
Hmm.
And do you give birth to this baby or did your wife give birth to this baby?
This one I gave birth to, as well as my almost 6-year-old daughter. And then she birthed our almost 3-year-old son. So we have
It's so cool.
almost 6, almost 3, and 2 months.
Yeah, I've got plenty of LGBTQ, specifically lesbian couples that I help to care for that are in my family, and they almost
Hmm.
always kind of there's this sort of separation of power where one person is the support person and one person carries all the babies. I love that you and your wife. What's your wife's name, by the way?
Julia.
Julia. So you and
Yeah.
Julia really split kind of
Yeah.
the baby carrying responsibilities. Are you going to have more kids, you think?
Yeah. Well, if we do, it's her turn. I'm done.
You don't have to draw straws. It's already been
Yeah,
determined.
yeah. So
Um,
we'll see. She thought she wanted to before this one, and then now we have a newborn. She's like, maybe I don't have to.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I suspect you had probably a pretty, I don't know, I don't want to use the word easy because no birth and pregnancy is easy. We all know
Yeah.
that. But it can
Hmm.
be a lot harder if you're not taking care of yourself. So, given what your area of expertise is in really lifestyle modification for the betterment of pregnant women and their babies and their whole childbirth experience, I'm curious, could you share a little bit about your birth story, maybe just so that people can see it in practice, what you preach?
Yeah. Well, my wife is also very healthy and fit, and all 3 births were very different. And it was interesting because my first birth, um, had just started my PhD, but I was also teaching fitness classes and doing health coaching part-time, and so I was very active, strength training, cardiovascular training and teaching, and my daughter came 2 weeks early and almost shot out of me.
Oh,
Like I could, I actually, what was hardest was me staying calm. It happened so fast. I, towards the end, was having like a panic attack because I was like, wow,
wow.
I'd barely even made it to the hospital.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
very, very uh, crazy for your first. And then the second one, I knew more what to expect. I could feel the early signs of labor. We had a hospital birth both times. The first time I was delivered by a midwife, the second time an obstetrician, and I had yeah, an awesome birth. Like, I'm just really grateful, I think, because I was just so much more able to stay mindful and, kind of tune into the pain. And I listened to a lot of like hypnobirthing podcasts and
Yeah.
stuff, just
Uh-huh.
about staying mindful and knowing that this pain isn't saying something's wrong. It's
Bingo.
part of the process getting you closer to your baby,
Bingo.
so
Yeah. Yeah.
just a totally different headspace. And then my son, he was all tangled up in the cord and ended up in an emergency C-section. And
No way.
it was not the birth that my wife planned. And she was pretty disappointed about that. But, he came out and he's healthy and happy. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And so you have a 6-year-old daughter, a 3-year-old son, and a 2-month-old son, right?
yeah.
Did
Mhm.
your second birth with Jack here, did it go as quickly as your daughter?
Yeah. So let me think. He started, I started having contractions. Sorry. Going on limited sleep here with feeding newborns all
You
night.
don't
But
say.
yeah. Anyway, I started contracting maybe around 5 p.m. and he was born at 2 a.m. So,
Oh, it's still
um,
very, a lot of
yeah,
women
and it was
would be
just a
very,
consistent kind of march towards the finish line. It wasn't, like the
um,
other one, it kind of went from 0 to, 100 pretty quick. This one was
yeah.
just like, yeah, as kind of a textbook as I could hope for.
Yeah, absolutely. You said something really important that I think it bears repeating. A lot of people, they struggle, they grapple with the notion of being in pain. And while,
Mhm.
of course, I'm a man, and I don't have a uterus, I will never give birth. And I've attended a bunch of pregnancies and talked to a lot of women who have given birth many times. One person in particular that's on my mind right now has given birth 10 times naturally. It's never
Wow.
completely the same. It's always completely unpredictable in a lot of ways, as you've
Yeah.
already experienced even between your two kiddos. And of course, Julia's, birth was quite different. But the pain that a lot of women who can really surrender to the experience and to kind of let go of the reins, they usually don't really use the word pain, which you kind of were
Oh,
skirting around it too, where it's yes, it's pain,
yeah.
but it's not like somebody just shot you in the shoulder. That would hurt like hell.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure childbirth also is very, very painful. I'm just going to give everybody the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
And most women who take hypnobirthing, including my wife, they don't ever really say the painful contractions. They
Mm-hmm.
speak about the pain as more of a function of the body. It's sort of like when
Yeah.
you and your wife are both military trained. You were a drill sergeant, and
Mm-hmm.
and I'll ask you about that again in a second because you said something very funny before the recording. But if you are rucking through the hills of Texas for 13 miles, that's a lot of pain.
Yeah.
And doing a lot of push-ups can create a lot of pain in the shoulders and in the scapula and the chest. But being shot or doing this type of work is quite different from these surges that are bringing your baby into the world. I want
Yeah.
to just kind of explore that a little bit. How did you, I mean, given that you do have all of this military training, you've been an exercise enthusiast your whole life. And by the way, guys, we're going to be getting into exercise and pregnancy, consider yourself warned. um, how do you talk to people who haven't had a baby before when they say I'm afraid of the pain? How do you help them work through that if you might just gesticulate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think I view it more as feedback.
Mm,
Like, I could tell. I'll give you a quick example. When my obstetrician told me to push, I was pushing, and I told her, I feel like I'm just bearing down. I don't feel like I'm pushing him out. Like, I was talking to her during, like, I almost like I don't feel like I'm pushing right,
yeah.
and it's because I could feel where he was in my body,
Mm,
and I was pushing with all my might, and he just felt high still,
yeah.
and so anyway, I visualized pushing him down and using my breath, and two pushes later he was out, and so anyway, it certainly wasn't comfortable, but it's like it was almost like a conversation I was having with my body about what needed to be done.
Sure, sure.
Um,
Yeah.
and so, yeah, it wasn't pleasant. It hurts. I'm not going to sugarcoat it,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that pain served a function. I knew by the increasing intensity that he was closer to being born,
Yeah. Yeah. Mm.
and I could feel, in my pelvic floor how close he was, and it was a really incredible experience. I'm not sure I, would look forward to doing it again, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I hear some people they love it and it's this, amazing
And
experience.
they
For
have
me,
10
it was
kids,
just
like
like,
my friend.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
For me, it was. I'm so glad I did it, and I'm so glad it's over. That's how I explain my military career. Actually, I'm so
Yeah.
glad I did it, and I'm so glad it's over.
Tell me what you say.
You
You're
know,
you're a bit of a rule breaker. You're studying the application, or let's say the let's say the application of the exercise sciences as
yeah.
an important part of an OBGYN's training and their clinical practice. That's really
Hmm.
where the money's at, because we have plenty of books. I've got a couple here. The
Hmm.
Active Birth. We've got Katie Bowman's Diastasis Recti, James Clapp's, of course, Exercising Through Your
Yeah.
Pregnancy, Functional Anatomy. I mean, I've got so many books here that really do provide us with some insights into how
Hmm.
exercise might be beneficial. But if us
Yeah. I wish more people
OBGYN,
would read them, honestly.
I know, well, that's actually a big thing. It's like, you don't go, what I always say is you don't go to the hardware store to buy your steak, your beef and chicken for your meal. You go there to buy nails and hammers and things. And you don't go to your local grocer to buy duct tape necessarily, or mouse traps or whatever. There are certain
Yeah.
places you go for specific things. And unfortunately,
Hmm.
because we haven't really dedicated ourselves in through the lens of just medical education in general to helping um, physicians, in training, appreciate just how impactful adequate nutrition, adequate hydration, adequate movement, like functional movement patterns,
Hmm.
sleep, mindset, whatever, that all of these things really play into our health. We all know it, but most doctors
They're
are
the
not kind of,
foundation. I mean, without that
yeah,
stuff, like
yeah,
it's
yeah.
really hard to have just basic health.
Yeah, exactly. So all of the pharmaceuticals and surgery, I'm glad we have that. And you hit by a car, you got to go get fixed by a trauma surgeon. You get a big tumor, somebody like your wife can help remove it. Thank goodness. But at the
Yeah.
foundation of everybody's health is these basic principles that, while they are simple, it's very hard to implement, especially when us doctors don't generally take care of ourselves. So
Yeah.
that's really what I think, the crux of our conversation, I think, should entail
Hmm.
is why is this important, and how do we actually get it going? So before we do that, though,
Okay.
you're rattling cages by doing your work. I don't
Yeah.
suspect that you're somebody who really loves just doing the status quo thing. I mean,
No.
you're in a lesbian partnership. You lived in Texas despite that. I mean, you guys have a pretty interesting story. And both of you, by the way, are like, hoorah, army soldiers. So now maybe that's not how you would identify, but I see anybody who did 8 years in the military as a pretty tough cookie. So,
Yeah. Thanks.
so having said all of that, tell me, your last name is pronounced
Rebel.
Rebelle. Okay. So
Yeah.
you were a drill sergeant in the army, and
Hmm.
you are drilling young men and
Hmm.
making them follow your directions and whatnot.
Yeah.
You stepped away from the military, and was a part of that your sort of inherent rebel yourself?
Yeah. I just, I lived in kind of this constant, with this understanding that in the back of my mind, the military could tell me to move or deploy or do something,
Yeah,
against my will at any time. And without digressing too much, I was served during the Iraq War after 9/11, when
sure.
we were invading a country, and I didn't and that when we first went into Afghanistan, my unit was one of the first to go. And I didn't go. I was still in my drill sergeant school training, and so I didn't go. And then once I finished drill sergeant school and started training these young soldiers to go, I was just like, this doesn't feel right. I don't like this. I love the individual. I love pushing people to their their to levels that they didn't know they could reach. And
Yeah.
that's what I loved as, being a coach or a drill sergeant or someone who just really helps people see their full potential. Um, But then shipping them off to Afghanistan, I was like, that feels a little uncomfortable for me, you
Yeah,
know?
right. Well, I mean, we knew so little about what was happening over there. Of course, we were all
Yeah.
very, very sad about 9/11, but it's
Uh-huh.
just seemed like it was this path, kind of like in the medical system. You get on the medical train, it's hard to get off the train. Once you get on the war
Yeah.
path, it's kind of hard to step away from that. We've
Yeah.
invested so much. And I don't know, have we pulled all of our troops out of Afghanistan yet? I know that it
Yes.
was on the table.
Hmm.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. I remember the big planes taking off, and there were a lot of like local
Yeah.
Afghanis
It
that were
was.
trying to flee because the
Hmm.
Taliban was going to start, doing their thing again, I suppose.
Yeah.
But
My wife was there, not during the withdrawal, but the year before. She was stationed there for 6 months when we had I think a 1.5-year-old, and
wow,
yeah, it was really stressful.
wow.
But I feel like we're going down a whole other path.
Yeah, yeah. No, no, no. I'm totally with you. Let's get to your PhD work. Your PhD is in, what was your dissertation on?
Exercise and performance psychology, and my dissertation was in the health beliefs of women in the South regarding physical activity during pregnancy.
Right on, right
Um,
on. You sent me a
yeah.
poster sort of presentation, which for those
Hmm.
out there who don't know, when you write a big paper and you get all your data, you get it analyzed, you write up the paper. Usually when you present it, it's more easy to just present it as a poster as opposed to expecting somebody to read your whole paper. But I
Hmm.
think it's extraordinarily important work for all the reasons we've described. A lot of doctors know it's important, but we don't have a system that really incentivizes us to take care of ourselves, to even understand the
Yeah.
basics of human movement, let alone how to apply it in a functional way for the clients that probably need it most. And I think that our
Yeah.
maternity care system would benefit so greatly if we were starting to implement this more. So I've already, kind of rung off the books, but in short, people have heard me say this so many times before. Virtually every pregnancy complication, those prolonged pregnancies up to 41, 42 weeks, where you're really trying to get labor going, um, the protracted labors, your postpartum recovery, everything is impacted in a beneficial way when you're
Even
adequately,
fertility, even getting pregnant to begin
even
with,
fertility.
is
That's
hugely
absolutely
impacted.
right. That's absolutely right. So tell us, in brief, remember we don't have a bunch of PhD brainiacs like you that are, I'm one of the people that I love the research, but sometimes if we get into the weeds on the statistical analyses,
Yeah,
sometimes I
I
kind of
won't.
miss the big picture. So maybe
Yeah.
just describe to us what you found because your results were pretty compelling.
Thanks. Yeah. So basically, we had a sample of 292 recently pregnant women throughout the South. So every southern state was represented. And we gave them a survey about their beliefs during pregnancy, what they perceived themselves to be susceptible to health-wise, and whether their provider, whether it was a midwife or obstetrician, provided counseling on physical activity during pregnancy. And we found that most people understood that there was kind of a general benefit to physical activity during pregnancy. Um, but the benefits were kind of all over the place. There wasn't like one benefit that really stood out. What there was the most agreement on is women, even though they knew it was overall beneficial, they didn't do it. They didn't exercise because they were tired and unmotivated. Those were the
Mm,
two main, and that is consistent across the research. I mean, women, we're tired.
yeah,
We're
yeah,
working, we're raising
yeah,
kids, it's like exercise is low on the list,
sure.
especially when it's kind of just, yeah, there's a general benefit. I don't really know how it applies to me.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and they found themselves most susceptible to mental health problems, so not cardiovascular disease, diabetes. They found themselves most susceptible to anxiety and depression. And provider counseling had no impact. More than half the women said they were counseled by their provider on exercise, um, and it had no impact. The only slight correlation was in an uptick of sedentary behavior among those who said they were counseled. Um, and
Really?
so,
Wait, so they were told it's important and then actually that actually led them to be more sedentary? Is that what you mean?
yeah. And so, I speculated in the paper why I think that is, but really, in my anecdotal experience and in the research that I've read, um, most providers frame physical activity advice in do a light activity. Take it easy. Go for a walk. Don't overdo it. Um, don't get your heart rate above 140 because it'll, take oxygen from the baby. Like there's all these really cautionary, kind of outdated recommendations that are given. And even if it's framed in like, you should be active, but don't do X, Y, Z, A, B, whatever. Well, that's going to scare women,
Yeah. Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
oh, well, maybe I shouldn't, keep going to the gym. I'll just go for a walk. And then you get busy and you don't. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, counseling with a, kind of a negative twist to it can certainly decrease the physical activity.
So I think people who listen to my show, people who come to me, like if they want a home birth, if they're not exercising and eating well, I actually will decline
Smart.
the opportunity to make a bunch of money. It's not important enough to me to end up in trouble when I know that this person hasn't cared for the temple. Having said
Yeah.
that, as a disclaimer, I realize not everybody can afford a $200 Orange Theory membership or a fancy spinning class membership. I get all of that. But I would, eventually in this conversation like to get into what do we mean by exercise? So let's
Yeah.
park that because
Mhm.
you don't need to be a competitive power lifter or going to play racquetball every day.
Not
Racquetball.
at all.
We even play racquetball anymore. I love racquetball, but basketball or whatever every single day.
Yeah.
This is really a matter of just moving your body and reminding your musculature, your integument that we need to stay flexible. We need to stay mobile. So we'll get into that. But I also,
I personally haven't had a gym membership in probably 5 or 6 years.
yeah,
I
yeah.
walk my kids back and forth to school, and around town about 3 miles a day. That's, my main form of exercise.
Well,
But
since
anyway,
since you brought it up, let's actually talk about it then.
sorry.
So you've got a 6-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 2-month-old. My wife and I
Mhm.
have a 3-year-old and a 1.5-year-old. I too, I we have a YMCA membership. We maybe go once per week. I also had a CrossFit membership. It's all expensive, and I wasn't finding I was able to
Mhm.
utilize it as a busy dad. But
Yeah.
just like your client, your the participants in your study, my emotional energy starts to become unraveled. I start to become a
Mhm.
very agitated, not a mean guy. I'm never mean, but I just have a lower, sort of a shorter fuse for the rigors of being a dad. So a lot of people, when they have kids, they start to quote, let themselves go and not to prioritize those things.
Yeah.
And what I want to tell everybody out there is, as I'm sure I'm hoping you'll fully clarify in the city of Los Angeles, when we were in LA, we didn't even have a car for the first 2 years. And we were biking everywhere and we were walking and carrying our groceries,
Mhm.
farmer style, all the way back from maybe a mile and a half away at the grocery store. That was our exercise. And as a busy
Yeah.
resident at Kaiser in LA, there wasn't a lot of time to exercise. I did have a kettlebell that I would keep in the call room and just go and swing it a couple times once in a while. But really, it came down to how can we fit this in? And is this a priority? If it becomes
Yeah.
a priority, if we can convince you that it's a priority, you don't have to actually even dedicate that much time to it. I won't spoil your story because you've got 3 babies and you've got
Mhm.
a 2-month-old. Tell me about your routines. Like how do you fit in this very, very critical thing into your life?
Well, my kids go to school just under a mile away, and it's slightly uphill all the way
Right
there.
on.
And I carry a 12-pound baby in a wrap like I am now, and I push a double stroller. And I get looks and comments almost every day
Yeah.
because I'm
Yeah.
just like I'm like this unicorn that people are like, "What are you doing? Why aren't you in a car?" It's amusing to me how people are kind of baffled by the fact that I'm walking
Yeah.
with 3 kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's honestly my main form of exercise, and it's also my kind of main form of stress relief too.
Sure.
That walk and that routine, and then it's kind of time with my kids too. That transition to and from school, so it serves a lot of purposes for our family.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, so I don't know if we've even said this yet, but you live in Los Angeles and Santa
Mhm.
Monica, where
Yeah.
you've got one of the world's most wildly popular beaches, but you're
Hmm.
10 blocks away from that. When I was in LA, it was very, very hard to get there and to think
Hmm.
I was actually going to schedule volleyball or whatever else.
Yeah.
And there were people that also did that. You can go down to the rings. Did they still have all that at Venice and whatnot?
Yeah.
The
Muscle Beach.
acrobatics and stuff.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, there are plenty of ways to stay active in LA, but I will also say that the vast majority of even my colleagues were in their car for almost every single activity. But
Hmm.
even if you do have a car, you would have to try to get, you want to park as close to the beach as possible. Why not just save on parking, park
Yeah.
5 blocks away, and even
Hmm.
skateboard or whatever. You could jog, you can walk, you can do whatever. That is also a part of living a healthy lifestyle. So
Yeah.
you pull up to the grocery store, park at the other side of the parking lot and carry your groceries out of the store. That might be all the exercise you get during the day, but it's better than just being sedentary in your car, in your apartment, on the escalator or whatever
Hmm.
else. So it's just a
That's
matter of
why
fitting it in.
I, I prefer the term physical activity over exercise, because physical activity can be just what you said, like parking further away, or taking the stairs instead of the elevator, or just staying active. And the kind of lifestyle, like what I'm really a proponent of is providers understanding how to offer lifestyle counseling,
Sure.
like understanding where your patient is, what's their starting point,
Right.
how can we just build on that a little bit, and in the paper, I suggested motivational interviewing. I'm sure you've heard of it.
Yeah, tell
And
tell
it's
everybody a little bit about that because we have midwives, doulas, childbirth educators, even some doctors that are listening.
Yeah, so basically, just in a nutshell, it's about kind of meeting the client or the patient where they're at, rather and coming alongside them in the journey of kind of helping them come to solutions, overcoming barriers. Okay, your number one barrier is you're fatigued. Did you know exercise during pregnancy actually improves and increases energy? It won't make you more tired. So it can be a solution to your main barrier. So just kind of figuring out where their problem points are and helping be part of the solution, and also asking open-ended questions and letting them come to their own
Yeah.
conclusions, rather
Yeah.
than this paternalistic top-down approach of like, I'm the
You
doctor, I'm
move
the
things.
midwife, I'm going to tell you what you need to do.
Hmm. Hmm. You kind of glazed over this before, but let's, as a part of counseling, sometimes we give all of the bad things and then we also say, but you can still move, right? And they've already been sort
Yeah,
of now conditioned to believe that it's unsafe.
exactly.
There are very few movement patterns, exercises, sports activities that I'm like, it's a hard no for me to be doing that. Like
Mhm.
rugby, great
Yeah,
example. Maybe not a great
downhill
idea to
skiing,
do.
maybe don't.
Downhill skiing, yeah. I even had a friend who was pregnant and we were rock climbing in a gym setting, in San Diego. And, you can fall and bump your belly, but she was a good climber and she was just conditioning her arms and her fingers and using some,
Mhm.
low grade, you know, techniques and whatnot. Um, I want to ask you though, for anybody out there who has been told this, who is conditioned to believe that it's not safe to exercise in pregnancy, are there any guidelines, principles that you give people to bear in mind, apart from just moving? Like if they did want to get into some like regimented drill sergeant esque exercise, what would you tell them, to be cautious of?
Yeah, I think mainly it's cautious of anything that doesn't feel right. That kind of
Great point.
learning to listen to your body, because everyone's different. I know some people will say stay away from planks and crunches, and I'm like, well, I had clients when I was doing prenatal fitness coaching. I would have them do a plank where they were elevated on a bench, and so their body was at kind of a decline, and their hips were up slightly, so their belly was pulled in. And we started at early in pregnancy and then maintained it throughout the pregnancy. We didn't start it in the third
Sure.
trimester,
Sure.
or kind of modified crunches on a stability ball where they're at a decline angle and they're kind of rounding their hips at the same time they're rounding their core and they're focusing on their breath. I think core work is important because you're going to ignore your core for 9 to 12 months, however long,
Yeah.
in the postpartum period too. One, it's going to atrophy, but then two, um, during childbirth you need those muscles, like, so keeping that mental connection to, going back to our earlier conversation about pain, exercise and physical activity is a wonderful opportunity to cultivate that mind body connection. And I remember telling a woman to oh, I forget what it was. I gave her some instruction of like listen to her body when she was like, oh, I can't really do this thing. I was like, just tune in and listen. And she's like, what am I listening for? Like, what is it saying? It's like it's a skill you have
Yeah,
to really develop. It doesn't just come naturally if you've never practiced
sure,
it before.
sure. Yeah, I think that that is great advice. In our first pregnancy, so the other thing people don't realize is number one, every subsequent pregnancy, you're older. So, like, you have a slightly different anatomical makeup and you've given birth. So, the baby's going to
Hmm.
sit a little differently. If it feels right and you feel good afterwards and you're not like aching with pain the next day, it's probably something that was good for you.
Yeah.
When my wife and I were pregnant with our first, we were on it was a bit of a mistake, but we were doing a lot of hikes around here. We didn't have another child yet, so it was just me and her connecting in the woods. And we had some of these lovely walks out in Red River Gorge and whatnot. But there was one morning where I was like, hey, why don't we go on a hike? It was a Saturday. And I said, do you want to do a little bit of a longer hike today or whatever? She was like, yeah, let's go really long. And I was like, wow, she's so powerful. And I think she was like
Mm.
34 weeks or something. So I picked a
Hmm.
9 mile hike
Oh my gosh.
because she was joking. She was like, let's do like 13. And I was like, come on, babe. I like cut it down for her, very
Yeah.
paternalistic, but she was
Hmm.
completely kidding. And when we were about 6 miles in, she had asked, like, so how far are we going anyways? I was like, oh, we've got about 3 more miles. And it was the next step she took where she was like, get me out of these woods. I can't believe you took me on a 9 mile hike. And she was so sore, couldn't even walk the next day. There is such a thing as overdoing it. So,
Yeah.
so
But I would say she wasn't listening to her body, she was listening to you. Had she been listening to her body, she wouldn't have
totally,
gone on a 9 mile
totally. It
hike.
was like a lesson for her. Like last time I listened to you when you planned the hike, especially now that that we've got kids and everything else. But
Yeah.
I wanted to also talk to you a little bit about, and you've probably seen this through your experience with young guys in the military in particular. They don't have kids, they maybe aren't even partnered, and they can go 4 or 5 hours of working out at a time every single day. They recover quickly. They
Hmm.
are large and in charge. They've got it all figured out. Can we talk a little bit about sort of an obsession with exercise as
Oh
well?
yeah,
Maybe you can, just riff on that a little bit, because I actually think that that's another equally problematic space for people
completely.
to enter.
Yeah, and I want to start this by saying that's one of the reasons I got out of the fitness industry and I'm trying to move more towards influencing healthcare
Yeah.
because I was working with these people who like they didn't need it, like they didn't need it to reduce chronic disease or have better prenatal outcomes. They needed it for kind of their own, and I'm sorry if there's any former clients listening. I'm not talking about you.
Talking about everybody
um,
but you, don't worry.
um, it was more of like kind of vanity purposes, or often people would come see a health coach or a personal trainer for company too. They're a stay-at-home mom, maybe they're on their second or third kid, and it's kind of their social hour. So anyway, I digressed a little bit from your question, but um, there are people where it becomes almost a disorder.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can think of several stories where one woman ended up fracturing. Actually, I've had two women I knew and previously worked with who ended up fracturing their hip. And I'm talking like early 30s, and
Wow.
it was because there was so much output, cardiovascular, running impact, and very little input. Like they weren't nourishing their body
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
make up for what they were requesting of it. Um, so it can be just as or even more so, detrimental. You can end up with overuse injuries. You can
Sure.
also end up, with not gaining enough weight, because people excess gestational weight gain is a huge problem in this country,
Yeah.
especially in the South
Yeah.
where my focus is. But but um, there are, as I'm sure you know, major problems when you don't gain enough weight. So it's all about balance. It
Totally.
has to be that kind of happy medium.
Yeah, I mean, I was born of that breed that you're talking about. This sort of, I don't need to do this for my heart health. I want to do this because I want to get more jacked. I want to have
Yeah,
the obliques popping. I want my abs to keep popping. And
yeah.
even in residency, I was sleeping maybe 4 hours per night. night
Hmm.
shift, never even seeing sunlight, go home and crash for 4 hours, wake up a little early so I could stop at the gym and bang out a 30-minute, really hard metabolic
Hmm.
workout.
Probably no warm up or cool down,
Yeah, I mean,
just
like a
went.
little like, pass throughs and maybe some stretching afterwards, but I got to get to work, right? So I was in there
Hmm.
crushing it for 30 minutes, get to work, rinse off a little bit, put my scrubs on, and I'm working for 18 hours. Do it again
Yeah.
over and over and over again. I found myself in severe adrenal fatigue.
And then we expect these providers to counsel their clients and patients on how to, be healthy. And
Yeah,
and they're
yeah,
often some of, I'm married to one. I have to constantly remind her, self-care. Go to your
yep,
physical therapist. Your
that's
back
right.
is jacked
That's
from,
right. That's
from
right.
bent over doing surgery for 18 hours yesterday, and or
Exactly.
working 48 hours straight with no sleep, or,
That's right.
goes
That's
on and
right.
on.
Yeah, when I met Paul Chek, who has a big institute teaching holistic lifestyle coaching, I don't know, are you familiar with the Chek Institute?
Um, I I don't think so. You
Oh,
might.
he's great. I mean, it's
You know
he's
what? That sounds vaguely familiar. I'd have to see it. Sorry, go ahead.
he like was the first guy to introduce the Swiss ball as like a form of exercise
Hmm.
for adding in some stability and all of that. But I mean, he has
Which
all
is
these
great for
patents.
pregnancy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I met him through their pregnancy, and I've done quite a bit of training through their institute, and he's a good friend. But one of his longest clients, he's another friend of mine, Jason Picard. He was a guy working in Wall Street, not taking care of himself, the partying, the alcohol, the drugs,
Hmm.
making lots of money, Wolf of Wall Street kind of thing. He was
Yeah.
extremely overweight and then found a health coach that was trained by the Czech Institute, and he got his life turned around, left finance, and the coach sent Jason's picture. I'm not sharing any like private information. He talks about this all the time on podcasts, but
Yeah.
he had sent a picture to Paul to say, look at the great results of my client. And Paul said, so you took him from soggy bread to burnt toast. That guy's got to stop exercising for at least, X number of months. Like he is in adrenal fatigue. Like he is
Yeah.
sputtering along. And
It can
Jason won't
become
even
an
believe it.
obsession. You start to
Totally.
feel good and you want to feel better. And then if you don't
Totally.
have that, it's almost like you need your fix.
That's
I get
right.
it.
That's right. And the media teaches us that as long as you have rock hard abs and back muscles and traps, that you're
Hmm.
in good health. But the problem is you can actually take this too far if you're not adequately nourishing the yin, as I call it, or working in, or doing some rest and recovery, especially if you're not sleeping and well nourished. So
Yeah.
balancing these things out is really, I think, important.
And in pregnancy, it's not, we're not, in residency and staying up all night, but insomnia is a huge
Oh
problem during
yeah. Oh
pregnancy.
yeah.
And then you don't have, the physical and mental energy. And so you turn to sugar or caffeine, I mean, so there's these kind of downward spirals of health that is often, um, triggered by pregnancy. And then say you have another kid a couple years and you haven't fully got back on track, with your sleep and your nutrition. And like, not to dive into the research too hard, but there's a lot of
Go for it. Go
research.
hard into the research, please. I want to know. I love these types of conversations.
There's a lot of research that says pregnancy is the onset of, or I should say, is a predictor of future cardiovascular disease, and future risk of obesity. And it's because most women gain too much weight during their pregnancy. Most women decrease their physical activity, and then add two or three more of those on top of it. And by the time you have your fourth kid, you're 100 pounds heavier than you were. You've kind of
Yep.
lost
Yep.
any sort of preventative care that you were doing when you were younger.
Yeah.
Um, and that's why, I think cardiovascular disease is the number one killer,
It remains
I
victorious.
know it's tragic. And one thing I want to say, there's a lot of talk in the maternal health world recently about the new maternal mortality numbers came out, and they're higher than ever. What isn't talked about as much is the maternal morbidity. So
Mhm.
basically the near death experiences.
Right.
So I've heard numbers between 50 and 100,000 women in our country almost die during pregnancy and childbirth, mostly because of chronic health conditions like diabetes, cardiovascular disease, which can be prevented or treated by these lifestyle changes we're talking about. And the fact that it's not a part of basic healthcare is like mind-boggling to me. Like this is
Yeah.
the low-hanging fruit of health. But let me ask you, Nathan, most of the doctors I know, so I think I'm going to know, sorry, I keep bumping my computer. Most of the doctors I know say nutrition or motivational counseling, interviewing, like counseling methods were options for electives. They weren't required. And nothing was discussed about exercise.
I don't think that we ever had a professor talk about, designing a basic exercise program. They would say it in sort of passing, cardiology, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can do these things, but if those don't work, you have to do the medications. And now for 55 minutes of the 60-minute lecture, we're talking about how beta blockers and calcium channel blockers and
Pharmacology.
whatnot
Mm-hmm.
work. Yeah. So it's pharmacology and surgery. And, you know, not to get, rattle anybody's cages too much, but we know that pharmaceutical companies are giving as much money as lobbyists
Yeah.
to our government officials as they are medical schools. I don't
Yeah.
have the numbers pulled up right now, but there are millions of dollars being invested by Pfizer, Bayer, Moderna in order to support our
Yeah.
many medical schools. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not going to go well if their professors are saying, guys, we are using too much nifedipine or we're using too much metoprolol, right? So,
Yeah. And nutrition
I,
and exercise don't make the hospital any money.
right, there's no money in that, And
Yeah.
so, going back to our analogy of going to the hardware store, your doctor has absolutely no fucking clue what a healthy diet actually looks like. They might be
None.
going by a food pyramid and they're going to be
Yeah.
telling you eat whole grains every day, which is fine for some people. But if you are trying to be optimally healthy, that giant rung on the bottom of the food pyramid that we all grew up with absolutely
Mm-hmm.
is not the way to be healthy. Like there is no opinion
Mm-hmm.
here. If you're
Pasta and bread
vegetarian,
and
yeah, right. Like whole grains, folate
mm-hmm.
enriched, your
Mm-hmm.
pasta and all that. Like it's just completely nonsense. And us
Well,
doctors,
and sorry,
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm all riled up now.
Please get
So,
riled up. Let's get fired up.
well, but then you have the food industry at the same time. Like they're the lobbyists that are, making the school lunch,
Sure.
requirements and the hospital food requirements and then the food industry has all these labels and these buzzwords, all natural.
Yep.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
Like there's
Yeah.
all these unregulated terms.
Yeah.
If what I tell people is if your food is trying to convince you that it's healthy, it's probably not,
That's a really good point. If you need to read a 500 word ingredient list, on the back, it's probably not real food. But
Yeah,
the you
yeah.
know the other since you brought up like the corporate sort of investment here, go to any
Hmm.
hospital cafeteria, go to the Kaiser, walk in there. It has a beautiful cafeteria with so
Hmm.
much potential to make any amount of healthy food that we could possibly ask for. And they're rich in sugar, starches, carbohydrates,
Yep.
vegetable oils. It is a
Hmm.
absolute disgusting mess in a
Yep.
hospital cafeteria from with Kaiser who has it's a nonprofit HMO, largely West Coast based, but they've got hospitals everywhere now. And their CEO boasts, at least back when I was a resident in I think it was 2018 actually, that after my residency, but I can't remember his name, Bernard Tyson, something like that. He walked away with like $8 million or something ridiculous as his salary. So
Hmm.
while we're us heroes in medicine who know all the science that want to shame and discard any sort of alternative therapies and this and that, we are going to those hospitals and not voting with our dollars. We're going and buying all
Yeah.
of that shit. Pepsi's over here, Coke's over here. Get
Hmm.
all of your slushies, get all of your Debbie's, zebra cakes and all of that. It's all right there
Yeah.
in an institution that advertises safety and healing. So
Hmm.
this is far more of a bigger problem than the
Oh
consumer
yeah.
not demanding it or the doctors not having the education. The entire thing is a perfect blend of all of the ingredients that lead to a nation who just got through a pandemic that, sorry, I didn't mean to say that, but whatever,
Yeah. I hear
a
you.
COVID thing, the COVID moment, it was a pandemic in which there was up to 60% of people to hospitals were either obese or diabetic. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, what the hell are we doing? So sorry,
Yeah.
that was my diatribe. Your turn to have a little
No, that's good. And
fun.
I'll just piggyback off of that. And who were those people? They were the people who were already struggling in society. You know,
Right,
the people
right,
working service-based jobs, living in generational housing or
right.
kind of multi-unit housing, like close quarters with
Yep,
with
yep.
people. And it's really frustrating because again, I'll go back to my research is mostly on the South because those are the people we need to reach. More
Yeah.
than half of our births in this country are covered by Medicaid, um,
Wow, I
because
didn't know that. Wow.
yeah,
Wow.
because a lot of um, and I'm cautious about the rabbit holes I go down because this is also a topic about health equity, systemic racism, the history of healthcare in our country, the
Oh
history
yeah.
of obstetrics and where it originated. And in my dissertation, I had 250 pages just to like rant about that. And
We
um,
go into that all over the show, so you're in good company, trust me.
yeah,
Yeah, it's an important part of the
and
history.
acknowledging the historical inequities that have led to the current maternal health crisis,
Yeah,
or just let's just say health crisis in this country in
yeah,
general of
yeah,
um, chronic disease. And in
yeah.
my study, 292 people, I think at least half or more than half were either overweight or obese. Um, and this was just a random sample. Interestingly, um, most of them rated their health as from good to excellent. So
No kidding.
there's this kind of disconnect between I think I think in our country, being overweight or obese is so prevalent that we've kind of forgotten, or maybe it's too taboo to talk about now. I don't know. I'm almost kind of like, should I be even saying this?
Yeah,
Because I am all about body positivity, and you can be overweight and healthy. There's health benefits to physical activity and all that stuff,
sure,
even if
sure.
overweight does not automatically equate to unhealthy. But it's certainly a precursor to future risk of chronic disease.
It's
And
just a
a
fact. It's not a judgment. It is just the
Yeah,
facts. We have a
yeah,
very, very overweight population.
yeah,
And to add on to that, as like a second disclaimer to my disclaimer, I am really, really not, this conversation is not meant to make people feel bad about how they live
totally.
their lives. There are a
Yeah.
vast, probably half of our country cannot afford to eat the way that I eat or that you eat.
Yes.
And we prioritize our resources so that we can get the highest quality beef from our regenerative farm down the road. We invest in organ meats. We get the cleanest water. That is not a luxury everybody has. But
No.
when we're looking at Kaiser and their CEOs walking away with millions of dollars per year, in the very least, you're admitted to a hospital, you should be getting the highest quality food. That should be a model for how to be, how to
Yeah.
live a healthy life. Otherwise, where are people going to learn it? We have a
Yeah.
bunch of disenfranchised, very homeless, or I should say houseless,
Hmm.
um, a lot of people, they make their home in what's the area in LA? Row,
Skid
gosh,
Row.
Skid Row, not Skid Row. Is it called Skid Row?
Mhm.
Yeah, Skid Row with all the tents, like in
Yeah.
every
Yeah. Yeah.
direction. There's
Hmm.
a lot of people that have a lot of mental health issues and drug abuse, poly
It's
substance
everywhere.
abuse disorders. So this is not a blame and shame. This is, hey,
Hmm.
we at the top, if we're the
Yeah.
ones that are holding the key to health, we also need to be modeling it. And us doctors, physical therapists, and PhDs should be demanding that hospitals can do better in the very
Yeah.
least.
Okay. So let me piggyback off that and say, going back to pregnancy, um, that's when uh, women, birthing people, they see their provider more during pregnancy and that prenatal period than they ever will in their life. So
Right.
what an opportunity to do basic health literacy education, and I'm talking basic that most people don't have. And that's, you should be striving for 150 minutes of physical
Yeah.
activity a week. That
Yeah.
breaks down to about 20 to 30 minutes a day. Even just that basic knowledge, and I, most providers don't share that. I don't even know if they know it. It's like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
basic
Very
recommendation of this
basic.
is what you need for your basic human health. Um, And even that like little tidbit isn't being shared. And in the South in particular, there's a lot of rural areas. There's a lot of food deserts where they don't have access to healthy food. And there's just a lot going against them,
Yeah.
and a lot of barriers to just basic health.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
it's maddening, and that providers don't, not just that they don't share it, but that it's not prioritized in medical training. That this isn't something that is just expected. They tell every patient, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And one of the big things that I really pissed a lot of people off in residency, that pissed a lot of people off in residency about my practice was, they line you up with five patients in the morning, five clients,
Uh-huh.
healthy women, young women, many of whom actually do have resources, but they've got five there, and you're a resident, so you're a little bit slower than the attendings. They
Uh-huh.
give you five people. You end up spending maybe 20 minutes with each person. And a big part of that is also doing the PAPs and doing the ultrasound and doing the
Hmm.
whatever. But there wasn't a lot of time left over for me to educate them about some basic, human foundational movements. Like, let's
Yeah.
just do a squat or a lunge. Here's some important stretches that I think will really help you through your pregnancy. I would end
Yeah.
up going over and they would say, "What the hell took you so long?" And I'm like, I
Hmm.
didn't get to cover everything. And they're like, "You need to get faster." So the first
Yeah.
thing to go that I'm not going to get sued for is the time I'm spent with
Totally.
lifestyle modification. But that should be a requisite part of our maternity care system. And
Yeah.
maybe a big part of that is people like you educating the masses around how critical the gap is between our education. I mean, I took it upon myself to learn everything I know. I was an
Hmm.
Ironman distance triathlete, and so I kind of had it, but there was no time for me to implement it. So sort of
Yeah.
system wide, we have some really, big disparities there.
Well,
Um,
and I'll just
yeah,
quickly say, that's the argument I hear a lot, and I believe you. I really
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not trying to like say, well, actually, um, that's why I'm such a proponent of like the evidence-based counseling methods,
right.
because something like motivational interviewing, you get straight to the point. It's not, like, here, I need to teach you this whole workout program, or
Sure, sure.
I need to teach you everything. It's okay, where are you starting from? Here's how you can, build on that. Or
Yeah,
here, you're not starting at all. Okay, here's the basic starting point. So
yeah,
basically you're just helping, and then you reiterate it every time, where it's kind of like, consistent. It's not all at once. It's about being consistent and like bringing it up. This is a
yeah,
priority. Have you been
yeah,
doing what we talked
yeah,
about?
yeah. Yeah, my approach actually, I guess I would call it motivational interviewing. I didn't know that term until I did my fellowship down in San Diego in hospice and palliative care, but motivational
Hmm.
interviewing around, your wishes, your values around end of life issues was really powerful.
Yeah.
But when I was seeing these women in the clinic, I would be trying to kind of multitask and also taking the opportunity if they said, "Hey, how's it going today, doc?" I would say, "I feel great. I went on a run this morning and I feel so great.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about what your day looked like. Are you able to fit in exercise?" And sometimes you just had to fit it in there, and sometimes that would
Yeah.
dominate the conversation. And people were asking, like people actually wanted to know. You're in LA, you're seeing all
Hmm.
these like hot dudes and babes on the beach looking good, and you want to look and feel good too, whether you're pregnant or not. So,
Yeah.
without me imparting what I was telling people, I'm curious, if somebody's listening and they're that person who's like, I know I need to do this. I feel like I'm a little bit more motivated after hearing the good Dr. Rebel speak about this. What is like somebody's brand new to this?
Hmm.
What would you tell them as a good starting point?
So two thoughts come to mind. Obviously, just walking is a full body, and that's
Yeah,
the number one recommended exercise by doctors. That's what is like the easiest to recommend. Everyone knows how
yeah,
to walk,
yeah,
um, and but finding something you enjoy. I
sure.
personally do not enjoy the gym. There's a lot of benefits to going to the gym. I don't like it, so I'm not going to do it consistently if I dread it.
Yeah,
But I do like being outside. So I'm going to find activities that allow me to be outside, whether that's a hike or a long walk or whatever. So finding something that gets your heart rate a little bit elevated, um, and a little bit of sweat, like
maybe a little sunshine in the morning. Get your
that
diurnal rhythms
sunshine,
back
yeah,
on.
vitamin
Yeah,
D, and yeah, I encourage people to use what I call the talk test, and not worry about heart rate and
hmm.
counting all that
Mhm.
stuff, and just you should it sh if you're really getting a good workout, it should be difficult to carry on a conversation. And that's
Oh.
how to judge the intensity. So people are worried about, oh, can I get my heart rate above 140? Can I do this? Can you carry on a conversation? Good. Then you're not at your max. But is it too
Push it a little
easy?
further. Yeah.
Yeah. Is it too easy? Then you should probably, kick it up a notch. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I can't emphasize enough the importance of doing something that's going to tone to at least build a little bit of muscle mass as well, especially if you have a history of gestational diabetes, or let's say
mhm.
you quote failed your glucose challenge with that toxic glucola crap in the beginning of your pregnancy.
Yeah.
There's so much evidence, and I get part of the issue I think here is that when doctors do speak, very, very frankly about this, it is taken as blame and shame. So
Oh,
when I
totally.
say that prevention of gestational diabetes is possible, I'm not saying you didn't do it right. I'm saying I wish I could have helped support you in that way,
Yeah.
because none of my clients get gestational diabetes because we're dialing in all the lifestyle stuff. And a big part of that is if we do nothing else, maybe you don't have time to go on a long walk, let's pick up our kid and squat a couple times. Let's lunge a
Hmm.
couple times with them. Let's go up and down the stairs. Let's build some muscle in that beefy posterior chain, because that is
Hmm.
actually going to improve your insulin sensitivity. And it could be
Yeah.
something as simple as that. You're not going to get shredded in pregnancy. You're going to maintain and perhaps even improve your metabolic function throughout.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up too, because using those large muscle groups,
Yeah.
so a squat
Hmm.
is possibly the best thing you can do, especially
Yeah.
when you're, like me holding a little 12 pound, he's about to be 13, 14, 15, I'm gonna be holding him, he's gonna be getting bigger. I need to be strong enough to be
Yeah.
able to support that weight, and squats, you're working your thighs, your butt, your core, your balance. And so it's like the most bang for your buck that
That's
that you
right.
can do.
That's
And it
right.
can even be just body weight. It doesn't have to be, you know, in a gym
Absolutely.
with a
Yeah,
bar on you.
absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. I would probably add, maybe, if you wanted to add something for upper body, a push up on an incline, or, a
Yeah.
deadlift or something. These are big muscle groups you're working.
They don't need
So
equipment.
don't even need equipment. Absolutely.
Hmm.
I want to wrap up our conversation talking a little bit about what, maybe women can do in the postpartum period. I think a lot of people worry
Hmm.
about that. And I want to add that when I was in Encinitas, I've talked to Lindsay Cantu. She's the owner of BirthFit. Used to be
Yeah. I see
a,
you repping the shirt right
I
there.
am. I'm going to make Lindsay proud here. They're a sponsor of
Yeah.
the show, full disclosure, but
Hmm.
she invited me
Yeah.
into her
I
website.
love what she's doing. Yeah.
She's incredible, and she just
Mhm.
announced that she's also pregnant. So we're getting her to see
Oh,
her
wonderful.
walk the walk. But I'm
Yeah.
taking her postpartum, or I'm sorry, her birth fit coaching program, and I've also taken their postpartum basics program, both of which are just sensational. Like, she is
Hmm.
such a breath of fresh air, and so invested in the experience, and taking in and honoring people where they're at and trying to help people fit it into their life.
Yeah.
It's something she always, she said, which I think you mentioned earlier, is you are training for a very, very hard thing here. So
Yeah.
let's get our bodies in shape. Let's get our
Mhm.
hips open. And one
Get
thing,
connected to your body so you have
yes,
that relationship
yes.
with it.
Well, you mentioned that. You said, I can feel
Hmm.
where my baby is. That's
Yeah.
another reason, this proprioceptive awareness of what is
Hmm.
right and what, how do I feel right now? It's not
And
something
what's
I
good
do.
pain versus bad pain,
Yes,
like ouch, that
yes.
hurts, or this feels like I'm really working,
This is a workout. Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. Um, so BirthFit, I think, does a really good job of this. There are fortunately some other groups out there, that I think provide some great education.
Yeah.
But one area that I am still, a little bit extra thoughtful about. The first thing is the pelvic floor. So I had a lot of women in Encinitas that was like the Pilates capital of the world. They were
Hmm.
so focused on training their core that they forgot about their breathing patterns, and their pelvic
Yeah.
floor was like locked up. Their pelvis was
Hmm.
locked up. They oftentimes had very, very long labors. Baby was in a malposition, and all of that. So that's not to say we shouldn't do Pilates. It's also, I just want to, emphasize the importance of making this a part of your routine, not the
Yeah.
routine. We have to be also focusing on our breathing, relaxing the belly, relaxing the pelvic floor.
Hmm.
And that brings me into, this final topic in the postpartum period. I've got a book right here, Katie Bowman's Diastasis Recti.
Yeah.
The big fears that women have, albeit very, very uncommon, is a persistent large gap between
Hmm.
the layers of the rectus abdominis muscles. There's a gap that forms physiologically in pregnancy that closes afterwards, but not for all women. So I was thinking about the core work and all of that, and I was wondering if we're tensing the muscles around a hard immovable object, are we going to
Mm.
exacerbate this gap within the linea alba, this connective tissue that holds those muscles together? And I haven't really come to any conclusions, but
Well, I wrote an article about it. I'll send to you.
oh, please. Well, do you want to spin on that a little bit? Do you have any insights into that? Because I think a lot of
Yeah.
women are
So,
really afraid.
so, doing, oh, baby's waking up. We'll see if I can bounce a little bit.
We'll wrap it up
Um,
soon, Christiana. You've been so generous with the time.
okay. So basically doing core exercises the way people did pre-pregnancy will probably make it worse.
Yeah.
Most people do them too hard, too fast, without a lot of conscious awareness, without um, following the rhythm of their breath. And so the core work should be maintained, but it should be kind of relearned, and so I think I mentioned this earlier. If you take a year off working your core, it's going to atrophy. It's going to be hard to rehab. It's going to be hard to re-engage, when you're ready to start again. So there should be some maintenance
Mm,
early on. So early in your pregnancy, you can keep doing your planks, you can keep doing your crunches, but learn to slow down, learn to use your core to kind of roll your body up with your as you exhale, and engage your pelvic floor. I just take a much more mindful approach to core activities during pregnancy, and then they can be maintained, with minor adjustments. Like I said earlier, I in the second and third trimester, I have women get on an incline on a stability ball.
yeah.
So then their lower back is, supported in the curve of that ball, and they can roll their lower they can roll their lower abs, their hips up at the same time they're rolling their shoulders off the ball. So everything's just slow and controlled and mindful. And you're not just, you know, cranking out 100
Yeah.
crunches.
Yeah, right. As
Um,
fast as possible. The CrossFit way,
yeah,
the Orange Theory and all of that. It has to be much more intentional. I appreciate that.
yeah, and the same postpartum with postpartum rehab. So I was just talking pregnancy, just quickly. I tell people it will close up on its own, like you said, unless you make it worse. And so many people, I even noticed myself, and I know better. Right after I gave birth, like literally in the hospital, the first night I woke up in a panic because, of course, I think, like, my new mama brain's like, the baby suffocated. I sat straight up out of bed, and I was like, oh, that didn't feel good. I
Oh,
should not have
yeah.
done that.
Yeah.
And we just kind of forget that our bodies have just been through a lot, and they don't move and operate like they did before pregnancy. So
Yeah.
teaching techniques to roll over and push yourself up instead of sitting straight up. And then also, if you have other kids, you probably know, as a dad, when you're in the driver's seat and you reach back to the car seat and you're like
Yep.
straining to get to, hand your kid a sippy cup or something, that like twisting under tension
Yep.
is really not good for those, freshly birthed abs. I don't know what
Yeah.
you want to call it, but
Yeah. Yeah.
so just being mindful, kind of, using your whole torso rather than like a deep twist, especially when you are under, tension, like reaching for something or holding a
Absolutely.
baby.
Amazing. Well, if you had your way, what would we do to change this whole problem of women not getting this type of counseling in their maternity visits?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you asked,
Where do we
because
start?
yeah, I think I think it needs to be prioritized in medical training. I think, honestly, continuing education might be good for some people, but it's still going to be those people like you who actually seek it out.
Yeah.
I think it has to be a foundational, core component of medical training in med school and fellowship, and or residency and fellowship. It has to be even just talked about. I don't expect it all to change overnight, and this to be, a high priority. but I feel like it needs to be a part of the conversation.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
there should be one course in med school about preventative healthcare, through lifestyle changes and lifestyle counseling using evidence-based methods. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
I guess if I
hopefully
had,
we'll get there.
yeah, I think if I had my way, I'd have like a panel. I'd have you, I'd have Lindsay Cantu of BirthFit. And she was also a chiropractor. I'd have Mike
Mm-hmm.
Salemi. He made a program called Kettlebell Lifestyle, which you would find just amazing. And
Mm-hmm.
it's all around the combination of balancing out, are you motivated and feeling well before you exercise? If you're not, maybe it's not a good day to be pushing yourself. And then
Right.
also it's the postural alignment, it's the breathing, and it's the importance of full range of movement while you're in good postural, alignment. That is
Yeah.
really, I think, where it's at. I'd have you guys all on a panel, maybe Julie Weeb as well, the physiotherapist, who's super, just so gifted in how she thinks about our breathing patterns, our dysfunctional and paradoxical breathing patterns, and how that
Mm-hmm.
actually impacts the
Gosh, the
pelvic
breath
floor.
is so important. Yeah.
So
You'd mentioned
important.
the pelvic floor, and I was thinking, Kegels have gotten a little bit of a bad reputation
Sure.
in recent years. But I think it's because the focus was on tightening. But if you can use Kegels, I
Right.
used what's called like the elevator exercise, where you
Yeah.
focus on raising it up all the floors and then focus on lowering it
I
down all the
love
floors.
that. I
So
love that exercise.
it's fantastic. So you're learning to release at the same time you're learning to contract.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so anyway, I'm sorry. I don't mean to keep bringing up things. It just,
No,
there's,
we could go for another hour. In fact, maybe after some time, we'll have you back. Maybe you'll have some new insights. Maybe you'll have a book or something. Is there anything you're working on that you want people to know about as we
well, right now I'm just trying to stay, sane with three young kids, but, um,
that's a project in and of itself for sure.
yeah. So my next step is I want to do some grand rounds for obstetrics programs, and really just kind of see the interest and the gaps in current obstetric fellowship programs and residencies,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then hopefully in the next 5 or 10 years, create a book that can be supplemental training for obstetrics programs,
Yeah.
um, and just a small kind of, even if it's part of an elective course, just like, um, yeah. So that's kind of I have some thinking and work to do around what would be in it, because I don't want to write something based on what I think they need to know. What are they willing to know?
Yeah.
What are they willing
Yeah.
to learn?
Yeah.
Um,
And if
so
there's
that
any like med students out there, if you're interested in exercise and all this, like if you go to your school, what happened with me is we had a small gym that was associated with a medical school. I went to Temple in North Philly. They had all
Mhm.
this old kind of iron equipment. The women never wanted to go in there because there was a bunch of dudes just grunting and
Yeah,
stuff.
it's a
It was
boys' club.
small. Yeah, there was
Mhm.
no windows. And I was like, I was really into CrossFit. I just finished my Ironman stuff. It was like, I don't have time for that anymore, but I'm going to start honing in on some Olympic lifts and kettlebell training. And I just reached out to the guy at the front desk and I said, listen, is there any way we could get some bumper plates and some other gear like medicine balls and things? And he's like, we've been waiting for somebody to ask us about how to improve this. Like we have a big budget.
Wow,
We haven't spent it. They had $5,000.
incredible.
They gave me all $5,000 to go on a shopping spree on Rogue. And this is when CrossFit was at like its peak. And we had this whole thing decked out. And as people saw me exercising there, other classmates would come join, men and women, mostly men, but
Unbelievable.
we would have a whole workout group 3 times a week and I'd design the workout and we would do it. If you aren't engaging in this now as a medical student, you're not going to really feel very
Yeah.
motivated or incentivized to do it later for your clients. So, and I say
Mhm.
clients because if you're pregnant, you're not sick. I just wanted to clarify in case you were wondering why I would
Yeah, no,
say.
that makes sense.
Thank you so much, Christiana. Dr. Rebelle. Where can people find you if they wanted to either read your work or maybe even just send you an email to chat with you?
Yeah. Well, it's christianarebelle.com is just kind of my, almost like business card website. And then I'm on LinkedIn, and
Great.
I just started an Instagram recently for my professional life.
How exciting for you, Instagram.
I can't stand
Double-edged
social media,
sword.
honestly. But I was like, I should be on here.
Yeah. you and everybody else, we're all like, I hate it, but as it gets so much, it allows me really to have a platform to talk about things like this. And we will
Mhm.
definitely be promoting this episode on Instagram.
Thank you so
Christiana,
much.
thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. This has been a real pleasure.
Thanks. Take care.